Hello, today is Thursday, May 5th, the 6th, and this is the A Course in Miracles Palm Beach Study Group. We are in the text on page 38, which is chapter 3, section 2. I have stated that the basic concepts referred to in this course are not matters of degree. Certain fundamental concepts cannot be understood in terms of opposites. It is impossible to conceive of light and darkness or everything and nothing as joint possibilities. They are all true or all false. It is essential that you realize your thinking will be erratic until a firm commitment to one or the other is made. A firm commitment to darkness or nothingness, however, is impossible. No one has ever lived who has not experienced some light and something. No one, therefore, is able to deny truth totally, even if he thinks he can. Any comments? Well, you know, that's a very reassuring statement. Do you have something to say, David?
I do, Diane. John, I had a question. Are they and I have something specific in mind. Are they talking about the truth about a subject or the truth in general and falseness in general?
Let me reread it.
Wait, can I tell you the specific I'm thinking about?
You can, but it doesn't really matter.
Okay, so yeah, that's what I want to know. Of like with a person, are they saying that everything would be false or just occasional false beliefs?
Okay, it is impossible to conceive of light and darkness. It is impossible to conceive of spirit and ego or everything and nothing. Spirit and ego as joint possibilities. They do not coexist. They are all true, all is spirit, or all false, or all is ego. It is essential that you realize your thinking will be erratic. In other words, flip-flopping between ego and spirit until a firm commitment is made to one or the other. You either decide with your free will for spirit or you decide for ego and you put your foot down and you say, that's that, I'm not going to fluctuate between them anymore. But then it says a firm commitment to darkness or nothingness, ego, however, is impossible. No one has ever lived who has not experienced some light and something, who has not experienced some of spirit. No one, therefore, is able to deny truth totally. No one is able to deny spirit totally, even if he thinks he can. So even an atheist who doesn't believe in God and he denies all that stuff and everything, but in some way or another, he sees spirit, he sees light, he sees something in his life, whether it's the love of a child or any other spiritual attribute, seeking peace. A lot of atheists are very humanistic. They say they don't believe in God because they don't believe in the Christian, Judeo-Christian definition of God and what have you, or they don't believe in religion, and they say they don't believe in it. But but there's a part of them that does believe in spirit, if they understand the definition of spirit. So that's what it's talking about. So it doesn't matter what your specific example is, because there's a million trillion specific examples that one could give. But it all comes down to no one can totally deny spirit, even if he thinks he can. No one who has ever lived, that's in all of past history, every billions and trillions of people who have lived in the past have experienced some spirit in their lives at one time or another. So it's impossible to be 100% ego, even if you think you can. Now, did I answer your question? I'll take silence as a yes.
How about a yes?
Yes. So going to paragraph 2, innocence is not a partial attribute. So now we've got the next. Innocence is not a partial attribute. It is not real until it is total. The partly innocent are apt to be quite foolish at times. It is not until their innocence becomes a viewpoint with universal application that it becomes wisdom. Innocent or true perception means that you never misperceive and always see truly. More simply, it means that you never see what does not exist and always see what does. So innocence is being defined as true perception, which means that you see spirit totally. And it says it's not real until it's total. And that's where you come to, the end of the road. You come to enlightenment. You come to the atonement, where the innocence becomes total, where the true perception of spirit is total. And so, again, that's another one of these partial attributes. Innocence is partial to us because right now we're still walking the fence. We're still walking through ego and spirit. Hopefully we're getting closer to spirit with each step that we take, but none of us has completed this journey yet, or we wouldn't even be here still, see? More simply, it means that you never see what does not exist. You never see ego, and you always see what does, which is spirit. When you lack confidence in what someone will do, you are attesting your belief that he is not in his right mind. This is hardly a miracle-based frame of reference. It also has the disastrous effect of denying the power of the miracle. The miracle perceives everything as it is. If nothing but the truth exists, right-minded seeing cannot see anything but perfection. I have said that only what God creates, or what you create with the same will, has any real existence. This, then, is all the innocent can see. They do not suffer from distorted perception. Questions, comments? Well, When they say someone is not in his right mind, that means he's not in the spirit's mind. But the miracle perceives everything as it is, and how it truly is that it's spirit. Remember, to the spirit's point of view, ego does not exist. So you can't possibly see ego if you're operating totally from spirit. So the miracle perceives everything as it is, as it truly is, as its spirit is. If nothing but truth exists, then right-minded seeing, spirit seeing, cannot be anything but perfection.
So John,
Yes.
so basically you're saying if you're operating in spirit, you don't look at the person's ego, you see deeper in them and you see their spirit.
Yes, you got it. Yes. So, and that's, when you lack confidence in what someone will do, you're attesting to your belief that he's not in his right mind. But when you see with innocence, when you see with spirit, you realize that whatever the person is doing, if it's ego behavior, it's not real. And that's where true forgiveness comes in. True forgiveness is able to say, I forgive him, not because he did anything wrong, but because he really didn't do that in the first place. He did that out of ego, and so it's not real. It doesn't really exist. I'm going to see that of God in everyone. I'm going to see spirit in everyone, and I'm going to look past their ego. And whenever we do that, that is an act of forgiveness. When no matter what the person did, we can look past that and say to ourselves, that was done out of ego. It wasn't real. I won't hold that against them. I will forgive them because they know not what they do. But I will see them as spiritual beings, regardless of what ego behavior they did. And when you do that, you're not only healing the other person, you're healing yourself and all of humanity. And that's what the Course teaches us.
John,
Yes, Dave.
judge, if you judge a person or what they do, how does that fit in the situation?
Well, the judgment is ego, isn't it?
Well, if you judge them wrong, if you judge them bad, then it's ego. If you judge them that I judge you to be good and I judge you to be a spiritual being. So, it depends on how you're using that term judgment. If you're using it as a negative connotation, being judgmental, being critical, criticizing people, all of that, yeah, that's all ego behavior.
Well, I had another question or comment, which is when I agreed with everything you said when you were explaining it. It made total sense about the forgiveness and letting it go because you understand they're operating out of ego. But you said it never happened. And that's the part I have a problem with, because it did happen. However, they weren't in their highest self when it happened. So it wasn't like it never happened. It did happen. It's just they weren't operating out of spirit, they were operating out of ego.
From spirit's point of view, it did not happen because ego is not real. Ego is an illusion. Ego is a dream. You do lots of things in your dreams at night that are not real. You wake up and they're gone, and they never happened in your reality. This is just a dream. So anything that anybody does out of ego in this supposedly real world, but it's not a real world. It's a hologram. It's just a dream. So one needs to realize that. One needs to think of it in those terms, that this whole thing is just a dream and it's not real.
But what, but if that's true, then why do we sometimes feel hurt or sad or disappointed? Is that because we're operating out of our ego?
Yes.
Well, we're human beings, we're spiritual beings living in human bodies. The human bodies are operating on the ego level, and they have emotions and feelings and thoughts and what have you, and that's, you know, that's part of life on planet Earth. And because people think that their bodies are real, because people think that they are their bodies, then that's the way they think and feel, and it becomes real to them. But the more that you understand and embrace the understanding that it's just an illusion, the easier it becomes for you to work your way out of those feelings and to understand that, you know, reacting with ego feelings is part of the ego, and I'm going to rise above that. I'm going to transcend that. I'm going to operate out of love instead. You're trying to hurt me, and I'm saying, sorry, you may think you hurt me, but I already forgave you, so I don't feel hurt anymore.
Where does healing come into play in this scenario?
Because every time you think with spirit, every time you offer forgiveness to someone else, you're offering it to yourself, and that is healing. You're healing the other person, you're healing yourself, and you're healing all of humanity, because there's only one of us. Hello?
It's a miracle.
We are one. There's only one of us.
That's right.
And what you do unto others, you do unto yourself. Shall I go on? We're on paragraph 5, I guess. Nothing can prevail against the Son of God who commends his spirit into the hands of his Father.
John, excuse me, I think you missed 4.
Did I? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I did. Thank you. 4. You have to be my navigator, Diane, because I lose my place. You are afraid of God's will because you have used your own mind, which he created in the likeness of his own, to miscreate. The mind can miscreate only when it believes it is not free. An imprisoned mind is not free because it is possessed or held back by itself. It is therefore limited. And the will is not free to assert itself. To be one is to be of one mind or will. When the will of the sonship and the Father are one, their perfect accord is heaven. So you are afraid of God's will because you have used your own mind, your ego mind. Well, no, your own mind. I'm sorry, I'll take that back. Because you have used your mind, or the peace of mind that each one of us possesses. There's really only one mind. I'll put that in there right now. There's only one mind, but each one of us share that in that one mind. And we think it belongs to ourselves. Some people think it's their brain. It's not their brain. The brain is just a tool. It's like a radio. It receives transmissions, and a two-way radio can send out transmissions. Our brains are like two-way radios, but the medium of communication is mind, which is all pervasive.
Is there collective consciousness?
Yes, that's another term that can be used. All right, so the mind, which he created in the likeness of his own. So mind was created by God in his own likeness, but we used our little portion of mind, we being the sonship, the totality of mankind, all of us, the oneness of us, we used it to miscreate. That's how the ego got started in the first place. We created it. With the mind that God gave us, we miscreated and created the ego. The mind can miscreate only when it believes it is not free. And unfortunately, that's the thought that we had. We had the thought that we weren't free, that we were trapped somehow, and that resulted in miscreation and the ego. So an imprisoned mind.
Excuse me, could you define miscreate, please?
Not creating according to God's will. When God creates according to God's will, everything is perfect. Everything is love. There's no, like I was saying earlier in the thing, you can't have it both ways. From God's point of view, it's only spirit, it's only love, it's only perfection, it's only innocence. And miscreating makes it imperfect, makes there be hate, makes there be jealousy, makes there be false pride and other negative things. So so when we miscreate, we imprisoned our mind and limited it. So to be one is to be of one mind or will. When the will of the sonship and the Father are one, when all of us together, the sonship and our Father are one, there is perfect accord in heaven. Then everything's together. So that's the goal we're working towards. Anyone else have any comments or questions or want to chime in? No, I don't.
John, David was just saying to me, we have you on mute in between. He was just saying that that's heaven on earth.
Okay, yes,
And I was thinking that when we're in alignment with God, you're basically saying we're in alignment with God, and that's heaven.
yes. Manasseh,
Yes. Hi. So I actually find this chapter very important and very interesting because I see that it's kind of exploring how do we perceive what's happening? Like, what are we actually perceiving in this world? And I think it could be very easy for someone to take the message in this and to kind of use it to justify bad things. Like, oh, that's just his ego. Ego does bad things and ego causes suffering. But I think the underlying message of what it's saying is that, yes, ego causes hurt, but what it's also hurting is just another entity of ego. Like, the reality is that the truth of who we are cannot be hurt. It doesn't mean that we don't pay attention to it. So if someone says unkind things to us, or if someone physically hurts us, it doesn't mean we ignore what happened to us, but rather it means we tend to what has happened. We pay attention to that with compassion, with kindness, with the wisdom that we are also not that pain. So so if we get a cut on the arm, we are not the cut, but we take care of the cut and we know that we're much bigger. So I think this is talking about it on the egoic level. Like, we are not the fear and the anger that comes up. It does come up, and that's okay. We can meet those emotions with compassion and to understand their function, and then also know that we're something much more deeper. And I think that passage you were just talking about in terms of like staying connected to the will of God and miscreation, I think the miscreation is the projection that we do sometimes. Like, we project a story onto the situation, we project judgment onto a person, and we separate kind of what's actually happening to what is happening, and or what isn't happening. And so there's kind of like this, it's the story that we're telling, as opposed to letting things be as they are, tending to them, treating it with compassion, taking action to make sure that that suffering isn't perpetuating, and at the same time knowing the truth of who we are at the base of it. So I felt like I had to read this several times because I feel like it's one of those things where it can be seen like, wait, so we just dismiss bad things? And it's like, it's not saying to dismiss bad things, it's saying to really take ownership of the truth, and from that knowingness of truth then come forward into healing. Like, you can't fix the wrong from a place of wrong, you have to fix the right from a place, fix the wrong from a place of right and compassion. So that was some of the reflections that I had. And then especially Diane and David's questions made me think of that too. So like, how do we make sense of the fact that we are truth, but also experience these very these things that impact us and impact the way that we live? So anyways, didn't mean to go on a ramble there, but thanks for listening, guys.
well, thank you, Manasseh, and I agree with what you said. The only thing I would add is that not only treating it with compassion, but forgiveness. Don't forget the forgiveness piece.
Yeah.
Because that's the bottom line. After all the anger and sorrow and frustration and blah, 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 if we have to come to a place of forgiveness, that's where the miracle is going to happen. But you're right. We in the ego world, well, as long as we're in the body, we can't just ignore things like that. I mean, you know, if you do get a cut on the arm, you have to bandage it and put some Neosporin on it or something, you know, because that's the responsibility you have. And, you know, the example of this, again, if I may turn to Jesus, he fed the hungry. He cured the sick. He did work with compassion and forgiveness. But he also said that, you know, I'm not the one that healed you. It's your faith that healed you. It's the Father that healed you. He just worked through me. And that's the attitude that we have to have about ourselves. We have to, take that on. Yes, we have compassion. We help to feed the homeless. We help to right the wrongs. We help to end poverty. Whatever we can do in the physical world with compassion, realizing that it's the Spirit working through us, working with compassion and forgiveness, working through us to make a difference in somebody's life, because the life that we're making a difference in is the life of a spiritual being. That spiritual being may be trapped in an ego body, but we need to recognize each individual person as a spiritual being, first and foremost, before any other consideration.
That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, John. Yeah.
Thank you.
I didn't think it would be possible to find compassion without forgiveness. But I'm really glad that you emphasized that again too. Because to me, I'm like, well, you can't really find compassion without forgiveness, but there is a slight distinction because, yeah. So the subtlety. So thank you for pointing that out as well.
You're welcome.
Manasa, it's Diane. I just wanted to tell you that was beautiful what you said. It really was very clear and well thought out. And then I like that additional part that you said, John, about you should add forgiveness in there. But that was excellent. I really enjoyed that. And so did David.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Okay, where was I?
Number 5.
Now we're on number 5. Thank you, Dave. Okay. Nothing can prevail against the Son of God who commends his spirit into the hands of his Father. By doing this, the mind awakens from its sleep and remembers its Creator. All sense of separation disappears. The Son of God is part of the Holy Trinity, but the Trinity itself is one. There is no confusion within its levels because they are of one mind and one will. The single purpose creates perfect integration and establishes the peace of God. Yet this vision can be perceived only by the truly innocent. Because their hearts are pure, the innocent defend true perception instead of defending themselves against it. Understanding the lesson of the atonement, they are without the wish to attack, and therefore they see truly. This is what the Bible means when it says, quote, when he shall appear or be perceived, parentheses, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is, unquote. Don't ask me where it says that in the Bible. I have no clue. Helena, did you find it?
Not yet.
No, she's looking though.
Is it in John, the book of John?
I don't know. I really don't. So what we're given here in paragraph 5 is a description of reaching enlightenment, is the description of reaching the atonement. This is what it looks like. A son of God who commends his spirit into the hands of his Father, and nothing can prevail against him then. And Jesus exemplified this. By,
John,
yes,
the, if we're not, if we're an ego, we're destroying ourselves.
sorry, say that again?
If I'm an ego, or we're all an ego, assume in ego we're one, we're destroying ourselves. We have no peace. We're hurting ourselves. But we don't recognize it until we're in spirit.
I don't agree with that.
He does or does
Uh,
not. Ask him. Jan, do you agree with it or you don't agree with that?
I don't agree with what I understand David to be saying.
Could you say more about what you don't agree about or how you see it differently?
Well, what I think he said was that we're all an ego and that, David, say it again, I'm confused.
Okay.
I think it's
I-
when
I-
you're
what- What I was saying is, if we're all in ego, if
we are an ego.
when we are all in ego, um, we're hurting ourselves. When we're in spirit, we we reach the atonement, the oneness,
We realize that. That's what you were saying.
and that's here. Explain it.
What I heard him to say, we never talked about it before, but what I heard him to say is when people are in ego, which isn't 100% of the time, as we talked about in paragraph 1, I guess, that at those moments, they don't realize how they've hurt themselves or others, or ultimately both themselves and others, because it's one. And that only when they go back into the spirit aspect, that's when they realize it. That's what I think he said.
Well, I think people understand very well when they've hurt themselves and others. People have feelings, and people do, even in the ego, have a sense of right and wrong. And even if you deliberately hurt somebody, you know you've hurt them. You can see them lying there on the floor crying or emotionally upset, or one thing or another clues you in. I mean, you know you've hurt them. The question is whether or not you forgive yourself for doing that and try to right the wrong. I mean, you don't have to wait until you're in spirit to know that you've hurt somebody, is what I'm saying.
Ego.
Say it again, David.
So when I'm in ego, I'm unconscious and I'm not feeling. I may hurt somebody because I'm not conscious. I say things. I'll speak about myself. Sometimes I'll say something out of character or just to get a laugh. And now in my life, I'm in spirit with all due humility, and I stop and think before I speak most of the time. I cannot stay in spirit. I haven't been able to stay in spirit all the time.
Okay. So I get what you're saying there. I mean, unconsciously, sometimes we do hurt other people, but it's unintentional. We're not consciously aware of that we're hurting them. And then they may react, and then we realize that we said or did something that was hurtful, but we didn't do it intentionally. And that's kind of like a different story from what I understood you were talking about. But, okay, the thing about it is we have to look at a broader picture, because we can nitpick on all the details for a million years. And actually we have. But the important thing is to come to an understanding of how the miracle process works to the best that we can in the here and now, and try to move forward in that light. Try to, learn how to do better as the days go by. It only does any good to analyze the past to help us realize how, we were working out of ego, so that we can avoid doing that in the future, consequently learning by our mistakes. That's the only really good thing about looking at the past, is trying to learn from our mistakes. But the important thing is how we move forward. The important thing is that once we realize that we've been working out of ego and not out of spirit, that we mend our ways, that we change our lives, that we move forward in spirit as much as we possibly can. So when paragraph 5 says, nothing can prevail against the Son of God who commends his spirit into the hands of his Father. So that's saying, nothing can prevent you. Nothing can prevent you from living out of ego once you commend your spirit into the hands of the Father, once you make that commitment. And it doesn't happen overnight, it happens gradually, but that's the process. By doing this, the mind awakens from its sleep, awakens from the ego dream, and remembers its creator, remembers that it's a spiritual being, and all sense of separation disappears. That's our goal. That's when you can wake up in the morning and have a knowing that you are a spiritual being. Even though you're still in an ego body on this planet Earth, how do you define yourself? Do you define yourself as your body? Or do you define yourself as a spiritual being inhabiting a body? And some of us, inhabiting the body is like having a car. You put yourself in the car and you drive it around for a while. After a while, the car breaks down, and then you get into another car. You reincarnate, you get into a different car. Now, some of us are driving around in Cadillacs and Mercedes-Benz, and others of us are driving around in old jalopies, or maybe on a moped or a motorcycle. And some of us don't even have a car, but all we got is a bicycle. But anyway, I digress. So you want to get to the point where all sense of separation disappears, and an understanding that you, the Son of God, that's you, you are part of the Holy Trinity. But the Trinity itself is one. So there's only one mind and one will. And there's a single purpose that creates perfect integration and establishes the peace of God. And that's found within the Spirit. And this vision can be perceived only by the truly innocent. You have to get yourself into that position of being in spirit and work your way out of ego into innocence. because the innocent heart is pure. And the innocent defend true perception, spiritual perception, instead of defending themselves against it, instead of defending ego. Understanding the lesson of the atonement, they are without the wish to attack. I mean, once you are in that space of spiritual realization, you don't want to attack yourself or anyone else, because they understand who they are truly, that everybody is the Spirit of God, and that in reality, there's only one of us. So if I attack anybody, I am attacking myself. And what good is that going to do to me? When he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And you'll notice that's not a capital H. They're not talking about God. When he shall appear, when another shall appear, when your neighbor shall appear, when your brother or your sister should appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is, as a spiritual being, as somebody that we are at one with. Comments? Well, on to paragraph 6. The way to correct distortions is to withdraw your faith in them.
Oh, John, excuse me, David was, I had you on mute and he wanted to ask you a question.
I try to practice oneness, and today, 2 different places, people came and asked me for money, and I felt uncomfortable, and I didn't give them any money. Is that because I'm an ego? Am I in fear?
What did you do?
I said no, basically.
Did you do anything else in your mind?
Yeah, I don't know if I made an excuse in my mind. I like to volunteer in organizations and work through an organization rather than hand out money to somebody that comes up to my window in my car.
Did you pray for them?
I'm not sure. I think one of them I may have. I'm not sure.
All I can do is tell you what I do in those situations. I usually don't have any money to hand out to people in the first place, but that's beside the point. Whenever I am in those situations, in my mind, I'm giving them a blessing. In my mind, I'm saying, you are an immortal spirit, whole and innocent. All is forgiven and released. And I'm offering them the knowledge from my spirit to their spirit, that they're spiritual beings and that they're forgiven, that they're innocent. And that's usually my prayer for them. And sometimes I add to that prayer that I ask Holy Spirit to please guide them towards their good, to guide them towards the place where they can receive what they need. Lots of times, especially I say that prayer to somebody who I see hitchhiking along the road. Now, I'm not in a position to be picking up hitchhikers, but no matter what they look like, no matter who they are, no matter what, I always say that prayer to them. Spirit, please send someone who is in the position to help them and give them a ride. besides my affirmation for them that they are spiritual beings, whole and innocent, and that they're forgiven. So that's my way of dealing with those situations. There have been other times where I have felt to assist the person and I did have money. And in that case, I gave them what I could. And so I have to take each thing individually. There have been times when I have felt led to do that. And there's other times when that just wasn't gonna happen. So, and even when the person that I did give some money to, I still prayed for them. Either which way, I'm gonna pray for them.
John,
Yeah.
I'm wondering why in your prayer are you forgiving them or asking for forgiveness for them? I mean, we don't know that they need to be forgiven, or I mean, I'm not understanding that exactly.
Everybody needs forgiveness.
Okay.
Everybody. And it's not me who's forgiving them. I am sending the thought to them that they are whole and innocent spiritual beings, that they are forgiven. I'm not the one who's doing the forgiven. Because they're spiritual beings, they are automatically forgiven. So that's the message I want to send to them.
You know what that's like? Did you ever see that that television show Touched by an Angel?
Yes.
They
That used to
usually
be one
put
of my favorites.
says that God has sent her and that God loves the person and that he wants them to know that they're forgiven.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, if an ego, we need to be forgiven, I guess.
John, did you hear that?
Yes. Yes. Did I start paragraph 6? Let's do paragraph 6 then. And because that's the last paragraph in this section. And then next week we'll start with section 3. So the way to correct distortions is to withdraw your faith in them and invest it only in what is truth. You cannot make untruth true. If you are willing to accept what is true in everything you perceive, you let it be true for you. Truth overcomes all error, and those who live in error and emptiness can never find lasting peace, lasting solace, same as peace. If you perceive truly, you are canceling out misperceptions in yourself and in others simultaneously, because you see them as they are. You offer them your acceptance of their truth so they can accept it for themselves. This is the healing that the miracle induces. And that says just what I was just saying about offering the prayer to those in need. Anyone?
So, so, wait, I'm looking at the last sentence. Because you see them as they are, meaning their spiritual self,
Right,
you offer them your acceptance of their truth,
yes, that they are spiritual beings.
or so they can accept it in it for themselves. Okay, that now that explains. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, this is a pretty good book.
All righty, so the way to correct distortions, in other words, the way to correct the ego, is to withdraw your faith in them, withdraw your faith from the ego, and invest it only in what is true. Well, that's spirit. Spirit's the only true thing. You cannot make untruth truth. You cannot make the ego into the spirit. If you are willing to accept what is true, if you're willing to accept spirit in everything you perceive, then it will be true for you. You'll have that spiritual understanding. When you can see that of God in everyone and everything in all of life, then that's what becomes true for you. And truth overcomes all error. Spirit overcomes all ego. And those who live in error, in ego, and emptiness can never find lasting solace. They can never find true peace. But if you perceive truly with spirit, you can cancel out this misperception, this ego perception in yourself and others simultaneously, because there's only one of us. Because you see them as they are, true spiritual beings, you offer them your acceptance of their spiritual truth so they can accept it for themselves. And even if you do it mentally, silently, it doesn't matter because there's only one mind. So your spirit is speaking to their spirit. And whether their physical selves or consciously become aware of it or not is not the point. They will eventually, because everyone will eventually come to the truth. And this is the healing that the miracle induces.
So, John, so let's just say, I'm going to talk about the other, but it's also true of myself. Let's say I see a person who's in their ego and creating all types of lies from their ego. And so let's say, so silently, you're saying that, which I never thought about this, but you told me you did this with your mother. And then it brought that back to my mind. But so silently, if I saw a person like this, I would just say to them, not to them, in my mind, I would say something like, you're a spiritual being, you're perfect the way you are, and you're already forgiven.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
like,
good. Yeah.
is that was that what you're thinking? Even if I can't stand the person and what they're saying and doing, I tap back into their spiritual self, and by acknowledging it within myself, I'm somehow helping them too.
Yes, you're helping both of you.
So
Yes, I was going to say, because I can't stand this person. Yes.
now, when I do affirmations, I do walking meditation with affirmations, and I find like one of them is we are one, which I've probably mentioned a few times, and I become one, and I see others as one, and somehow my energy is picked up by some of them. I don't think it's all of them. I also use I am compassionate, or I am empathetic, I am loving, I am kind, and my personality, I don't know if it's the right word, starts to change So I am all those things,
Right.
but I don't always see others. Well, they may in time feel that energy when the timing is right for them. But after many years of me doing this, I'm starting to see people picking up on that energy
Yeah,
after I've said it 4 million times.
yeah,
There are people who know what I'm going to say before I say it a lot of times because of who I am now.
right. Well, very good.
So Jan, so it doesn't, we may now never see the other person healed, but by saying these things, we're healing ourselves, which may be healing them too because they're interacting with us.
Not may, they are.
It will. They
It
are.
is. You have to believe that, remember. It is done unto you according to your faith. If you just say, oh, somebody told me to say this, I don't really believe it, but I'll say it anyway. Well, that's not going to work. I mean, you have to truly believe what you're saying, what you're thinking, what you're projecting towards the other person.
I call it, I named it God consciousness,
Yes, that's a good term for it. Yeah,
being in the zone,
yeah,
God consciousness. I have a whole bunch of, but for me, it works.
yes,
Well, what I was thinking about, someone once said to me, if you act as if, it will eventually become.
yes. That applies.
So even if you're not totally believing that it's going to transform, it will do it anyways because you're acting as if.
The more you do it, the more you change your mind. Remember, again, this is a process. You have to take step by step. The only way you're going to get to the top of the mountain is to climb up it one step at a time. So is there anybody else before we end our session for this evening that wants to add or has a question? Anybody? No? We're good to go? All righty then, everyone. Thank you so much for your attendance this evening. Let's end with a moment of silence, please.